He gave that company everything. Late nights, missed birthdays, loyalty they never earned. But when the truth came out, it wasn't about performance or policy. It was about color. Overnight, Jaden went from being part of the team to being a problem they wanted gone. They thought firing him would end it. Instead, it started something they'd never forget. Because sometimes, when the system shuts one man out, he builds one of his own. Before everything fell apart, Jaden's life looked almost perfect from the outside. He worked at a well-known tech company in the heart of the city. Glass walls, polished floors, endless meetings about innovation. He was the kind of employee people trusted. Reliable, quiet, the one who picked up extra work when others didn't. For years, he kept his head down and let his results speak for him. His mornings began before sunrise, coffee in hand, laptop glowing in the half-dark. He believed that if he just worked harder, stayed humble, and avoided conflict, the system would eventually reward him. But beneath the calm, small cracks had already started to form. The jokes he wasn't supposed to hear, the meetings he wasn't invited to, the credit for projects that quietly disappeared from his name and landed on someone else's resume. He brushed it off, telling himself it was nothing. Everyone faces pressure. Everyone gets overlooked sometimes. Still, something about the air at that company had changed. The way certain people paused when he spoke. The way leadership praised diversity during presentations but avoided it in promotions. He didn't realize it then, but the system he'd trusted was already closing in. Slow, polite, and perfectly disguised as professionalism. What was coming wasn't loud or sudden. It began with silence, the kind that follows after you speak the truth, and no one wants to hear it. The first sign came quietly. Jaden's name vanished from the project board one Monday morning, the one he'd built from scratch, the one that had just been praised by senior management the week before. In its place was another name, someone who hadn't written a single line of code. No one said anything, no announcement, no explanation, just silence, like it had always been that way. He tried to ignore it, tried to tell himself it was just a mistake. But then came the meeting invites he never received, the decisions made without him, the sudden coldness that followed him through the office like a shadow. Emails stopped getting replies. Reports he submitted came back under review. And every time he walked past the conference room, there were eyes that flicked up, then quickly looked away. It wasn't one big blow. It was 100 small ones, stacked carefully until they began to crush him. The kind of discrimination that hides behind smiles and slogans. The kind that doesn't leave bruises, but still breaks something inside. One afternoon, a new policy quietly appeared in the company handbook, a vague clause about professional conduct and attitude. Within a week, that same clause was used to evaluate him. He noticed the shift immediately. His performance reviews changed tone. The same manager who once praised his leadership now described him as difficult to communicate with. Behind closed doors, decisions were being made, and Jaden could feel his world closing in. He stayed late every night, documenting everything, emails, timestamps, progress reports. Like a man preparing for a storm no one else believed was coming. Outside, life went on. Cars moved. People laughed. But inside that office, the air had grown heavy with something he couldn't quite name. Prejudice, wearing a suit and tie. Then came the day that confirmed everything. A promotion he'd trained years for was handed to someone else. Someone who'd once asked him to tone it down during meetings. When he confronted the manager about it, he got that same rehearsed smile, the same empty words about fit and team dynamics. That night, Jaden sat in his car long after everyone else had gone home. The parking lot lights reflected off his windshield like distant stars, cold and unfeeling. He thought about everything he'd built, every late night, every missed moment with family. and how none of it mattered. Because no matter how perfect his work was, the one thing they couldn't look past was him. And as the rain began to fall, tapping against the hood of his car, Jaden made a decision he didn't yet understand. A quiet vow to never let anyone else hold that kind of power over him again. It happened on a Thursday. Ordinary at first, like every other day that came before it. But by noon, everything Jaden had built was gone. The email hit his inbox without warning. A short, sterile message. You are being terminated, effective immediately. No meeting, no explanation, no chance to defend himself. Within minutes, his access was revoked. His ID badge stopped working. Years of work, erased with a single line of code. He walked out carrying a box that felt heavier than it should have. Not because of the items inside, but because of what it meant. His team watched through glass walls, pretending to be busy. No one met his eyes. The same people who'd clapped for him at the last company party now looked through him like he didn't exist. Outside, the wind hit cold against his face. He stood there on the sidewalk, surrounded by skyscrapers that looked more like cages than progress. For the first time in years, he didn't know where to go. That night, as he sat alone in his apartment, the anger came. Slow at first, then rising like a tide. Not just at the company, but at the system that allowed this to happen in silence. The more he thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't failure. It was a push. He looked at the empty walls around him and realized something. They had taken his job, but they hadn't taken his vision. The same brilliance they'd ignored, the ideas they'd dismissed, could become something greater, something they couldn't control. And right there, in the middle of that darkness, an idea sparked, one that would soon change everything. Because if they wouldn't give him a seat at their table, he'd build his own. Months passed, and the anger that once kept Jaden awake at night turned into focus. He poured everything he had into building something new, a company of his own. One that didn't just talk about equality, but lived it. He worked out of a small apartment, sleeping 4 hours a night, learning, building, failing, and starting again. It wasn't easy. Investors doubted him. Former colleagues ignored him. But slowly, one client turned into 10. One project turned into a movement. He hired people like him, those who had been overlooked, doubted, or dismissed, and gave them the opportunity no one else would. Years later, the same city that had watched him walk out with a box in his hands now saw his company logo shining from an office tower downtown. Hundreds of employees, thousands of lives changed. When reporters asked him what drove him, he always said the same thing. I didn't start this to prove them wrong. I started it to prove us right. The company that fired him would later struggle, losing talent, credibility, and trust. But Jaden never celebrated their downfall. He had already won in ways they'd never understand, because his success wasn't built on revenge. It was built on purpose. And his story became more than one man's victory. It became a reminder that discrimination doesn't just silence people, it awakens them. That every act of injustice plants the seed of resistance in someone strong enough to fight back. Jaden's journey proved a truth too many still ignore. Racism doesn't just destroy, it builds something stronger in those who survive it. So the question isn't whether racism still exists, it's this. How many more Jadens will it take before the world finally learns to see talent before color? Don't miss more powerful real-life stories. Hit subscribe now.